Captain Hajin Kim stared out the window of the transport ship as it approached the Vrexian home world. The planet below looked dark and metallic, covered in massive hive structures that stretched into the clouds. He had been on many diplomatic missions before, but this one felt different. The Vrexians were known throughout the galaxy as cold and efficient. They did not smile. They did not laugh. They simply existed to serve their queen and expand their empire. Heijun checked his uniform one more time. The blue and white colors of the Terran coalition looked bright against his tan skin. He was tired. 3 months of jumping from one star system to another, delivering papers and shaking hands with aliens who barely tolerated humans. This was supposed to be his last stop before going home to New Sol Colony. Just deliver the trade agreements, attend one ceremony, and leave. Simple. "Captain, we're getting clearance to land," Yuna said from the pilot seat. She was young but skilled, with sharp eyes that never missed a detail. Her fingers danced across the controls as she guided the ship through the designated flight path. "Thanks, Yuna. Doyan, are all the documents ready?" Heijun asked. Doyan looked up from his datapad. The engineer was usually quiet, preferring machines to people, but he was reliable. "Everything is prepared. The Queen's advisors will receive the trade proposals tonight. We should be done by tomorrow." Hajun nodded. Tomorrow. He could do this for one more day. The landing pad was enormous, built for ships much larger than theirs. Vrexian workers moved around like insects, their 6 limbs clicking against the metal floors. They wore no clothes, their natural exoskeleton shining under the harsh lights. None of them looked at the human ship. To them, humans were just another species to trade with, nothing special. A tall Vrexian official met them at the landing ramp. Its body was dark purple, and a red sash marked it as a palace representative. "Captain Kim," it said in perfect human language, though the voice sounded like metal scraping metal. "The Queen expects you at the evening ceremony. You will present your documents then. Do not be late." "Understood," Heijun replied. He knew better than to expect pleasantries. The palace was massive. Tall spires reached into the sky, connected by bridges that hummed with energy. Inside, everything was clean and perfect. Too perfect. There were no decorations, no art, no signs of individual expression. Just function and order. The ceremony hall was filled with hundreds of Vrexians. They stood in perfect rows, silent and still. At the far end, elevated on a platform that seemed to float, sat the Queen. She was 3 times larger than any other Vrexian, her body covered in golden armor that caught the light. Her eyes, all 6 of them, watched everything. Heijun walked forward with Yuna and Doyan behind him. He held the data chip containing the trade agreements. When he reached the platform, he bowed as protocol demanded. The Queen did not acknowledge him immediately. Several minutes passed in silence. Finally, she spoke. Her voice filled the entire hall. "Humans, you wish to trade your minerals for our technology. This is acceptable. The agreement is approved." That was it. No discussion. No negotiation. Just a decision. Heijun should have felt relieved. The mission was complete. But something bothered him. During the ceremony, while everyone stood frozen, he had heard something. A sound. It was faint, almost musical, coming from somewhere beyond the main hall. In a place where everything was silent and controlled, that sound stood out like a star in the darkness. After the ceremony ended, the Vrexians began to file out in organized lines. Heijun was supposed to return to his ship, but curiosity pulled at him. He had always been too curious for his own good. His teachers at the academy had warned him about it. "Captain, we should go," Yuna whispered. "You two head back." "I need to use the facilities," Heijun lied. Doyan frowned. "The restrooms are that way." He pointed in the opposite direction. "I'll find it." "Go on." Once they were gone, Heijun moved toward the source of the sound. He walked through corridors that grew darker and less maintained. The clean perfection of the palace faded. Here, the walls showed age. Dust gathered in corners. This part of the palace was forgotten. The sound grew louder. It was definitely not mechanical. It was organic, almost like singing but sadder. Heijun found a door marked with symbols he could not read. It was locked, but poorly. The mechanism was old. Using a small tool from his belt, he managed to open it. The room beyond was dark, except for a single light in the center. And there, suspended in a transparent cylinder filled with blue liquid, was a Rexian. But this one was different. Smaller. The body was pale white instead of the usual dark colors. And as Heijun stepped closer, he saw something impossible. The Rexian's face showed expression. Fear, sadness, loneliness. Heijun's heart pounded. He had never seen a Rexian show emotion. He approached the cylinder and found a control panel. His hands moved before his brain could stop them. He pressed buttons, trying to understand the system. Suddenly, the cylinder hissed. The blue liquid began to drain. The Rexian's eyes opened. All 6 of them focused on Heijun. The creature gasped, stumbled, and fell forward as the cylinder opened. Heijun caught her before she hit the ground. Her body was cold and trembling. "Who are you?" Heijun whispered. The Rexian looked at him with wide eyes. She opened her mouth and spoke in a voice that cracked from disuse. "I am Thera, daughter of the Queen, and you have made a terrible mistake." Before Heijun could respond, alarms screamed throughout the palace. Lights flashed red. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. The guards were coming. Heijun had just wanted to complete a simple mission. Now, holding a shaking alien princess in his arms while sirens wailed around him, he realized everything had changed. And there was no going back. The guards burst through the door within seconds. There were 5 of them, their bodies covered in black armor that made them look even more threatening. They carried weapons that crackled with blue energy. Heijun slowly raised his hands, still supporting Thera with one arm. She was barely able to stand, her legs weak from years of imprisonment. "Step away from the princess," the lead guard commanded. Its voice was different from the other Rexians, deeper and more aggressive. She was trapped. "I was helping her," Heijun said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You have contaminated royal blood with your presence. This is a crime punishable by death." Thera suddenly spoke, her voice stronger now. "No, he freed me. I demand to speak with my mother." The guards froze. They looked at each other, uncertain. Clearly, they had not expected the princess to be conscious, much less speaking. Within minutes, Heijun found himself in chains, being dragged through the palace corridors. Thera walked beside him, surrounded by guards, but not restrained. She kept glancing at him with her large eyes. There was something in her expression that Heijun had never seen in any Rexian before. Gratitude, wonder, fear. The throne room was empty, except for the queen. She sat on her floating platform, perfectly still. When the guards brought Heijun and Thera before her, several long moments of silence passed. The queen's 6 eyes fixed on her daughter, then on Heijun, then back to Thera. "You are never supposed to wake," the queen said finally. Her voice was quieter than before, almost hollow. "Mother," Thera began, but the queen raised one massive claw. "Do not call me that. You are defective. You feel things that weaken our kind. I placed you in stasis to protect the Empire from your sickness." Heijun could not stay quiet. "She's your daughter. How can you talk about her like she's broken?" The queen's attention snapped to him. "Humans do not understand. We are born to serve the hive. Emotion is a disease that destroys efficiency. My daughter was born with the ability to feel joy, sadness, fear. These things make one weak. They cloud judgment. In our empire, such a creature cannot exist. But I do exist, Thera said softly. I have existed for 20 years in darkness and dreams. I thought I was dead. I thought everyone had forgotten me. The queen did not respond to that. Instead, she addressed the guards. Take the human to the execution chamber. He will die at dawn for his crime. Wait. Thera stepped forward. The old laws. The ancient rites. I invoke them. The queen's body tensed. The guards looked shocked. Even Hajin could sense that something important had just happened. You dare? The queen asked. The law says any condemned outsider may request the trial of 3. If he succeeds, he must be freed and honored. You cannot refuse without breaking the ancient codes. The codes that give you the right to rule. The queen was silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke. Very well. The human will face the trial of 3. When he fails, as he surely will, he will die knowing he was given a chance. And you, daughter, will return to your sleep. Hejun was taken to a cell deep beneath the palace. It was small and cold, but at least they removed his chains. He sat on the hard bench and tried to think. What had he gotten himself into? He should have just gone back to the ship. Now he was going to die in some alien trial, and his team would never know what happened to him. Hours passed. Then the door opened. Hejun expected guards, but instead, Thera slipped inside. She moved quickly and quietly, looking behind her constantly. You should not be here, Hejun said. I know, but I needed to thank you, and to explain. She sat across from him, her body language so different from other Vrexians. She seemed almost human in the way she moved, uncertain and emotional. Explain what? The trial of 3. It consists of 3 impossible tasks. The first is the death maze beneath the palace. It was designed to kill anyone who enters. The second is the proving grounds, where you must fight our greatest warriors. The third is the riddle of worth, where you must answer a question that has no answer. Sounds encouraging, Hajin said with a weak smile. Thera looked confused. What is that expression? Your mouth moved strangely. A smile. It's what humans do when we find something funny or when we're trying not to feel scared. Funny? You face death tomorrow. Exactly. If I don't laugh, I'll cry. Thera stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, her own mouth curved upward in an awkward imitation of his smile. It looked strange on her alien features, but there was something beautiful about it too. I have been awake for only hours, but already I feel more alive than I did in 20 years of dreams, she said. You saved me, even if it was by accident, even if it cost you everything. Why did your mother imprison you? Hejun asked. Thera's smile faded. I was born wrong. From my first day, I cried when others hurt me. I felt happy when others succeeded. I wanted to connect with people, not just serve beside them. My mother saw this and knew I would never fit in our society. She could have killed me, but some part of her could not. So she chose sleep instead. A living death, that's horrible. To you, perhaps. To her, it was mercy. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Thera stood quickly. I must go. Tomorrow, in the death maze, trust your instincts. Vrexians think in straight lines. You humans think in curves. Use that. She slipped out before Hejun could respond. He was left alone with his thoughts and fears. Somewhere above, Yuna and Doyen were probably trying to find him. They would contact the Terran Coalition. But by the time help arrived, if it arrived at all, he would already be dead, unless he could do the impossible. Hejun lay back on the bench and closed his eyes. He thought about his home on New Sol Colony, his small apartment with the window overlooking the valley, his friends who would gather every weekend to share meals and stories, his mother, who sent him messages every week asking when he would visit. He thought about Thera, alone in that cylinder for 20 years, aware but unable to move or speak or feel the touch of another living being. And he thought about the Queen, who had locked away her own daughter because love was considered a weakness. No, Heijun would not accept that. Tomorrow he would face the death maze. He would use every bit of human creativity and stubbornness he had. He would show these aliens that emotion was not weakness. It was the strongest thing in the universe. Dawn came too quickly. Guards dragged Heijun from his cell and brought him to a massive arena beneath the palace. Thousands of Rexians filled the stands, their bodies creating a dark mass of chitinous armor and cold eyes. The Queen sat in her elevated box, watching. Thera stood beside her, restrained by guards, but awake and aware. In the center of the arena was a massive hole in the ground. Steam rose from its depths, carrying the smell of decay and old metal. The death maze. Captain Heijun Kim of the Terran Coalition. A voice boomed across the arena. You have been accused of contaminating royal blood. You have chosen the trial of 3. Do you accept the consequences of failure? I do, Heijun called back, his voice steadier than he felt. Then enter the death maze. Find the exit before the water rises. You have 1 hour. Water? Thera had not mentioned water. Heijun looked at the princess, but she was too far away. He was on his own. The guards pushed him toward the hole. Heijun looked down into darkness. Then he jumped. He fell for several seconds before hitting water. It was cold and moved fast, carrying him through a tunnel before dumping him onto a stone platform. He gasped for air and looked around. The maze was lit by glowing fungus on the walls, giving everything a green tint. Multiple passages led in different directions. Above, he could hear water rushing. The maze was already beginning to flood. Heijun picked a passage and ran. The tunnel twisted and turned, sometimes splitting into 2 or 3 paths. He tried to remember which way he came, but everything looked the same. The water was rising faster now, already reaching his ankles. A Rexian would approach this logically, he thought. They would map every tunnel, calculate every angle. But Heijun did not have time for that. He needed to think differently. He stopped running and stood still. He closed his eyes and felt the air. There, a slight breeze coming from one direction. Air meant an opening. He followed the breeze, even when it led him through narrow passages that scraped his shoulders. The water was at his waist now. The breeze grew stronger. Heijun pushed forward and suddenly found himself in a large chamber. In the center was a platform with a lever. But between him and the platform was a gap filled with spikes. The water was rising around the spikes, and soon the entire chamber would be flooded. A Rexian would calculate the jump distance and try to leap across. But Heijun looked at the water rising. He waited. The water covered the spikes. Then he dove in and swam under the surface, passing safely over the hidden spikes. He pulled the lever. A door opened in the wall. Light poured in. Heijun swam through and emerged in the arena, gasping and soaking wet. The crowd was silent. No one had expected him to succeed. The first trial is complete, the announcer said, sounding surprised. Bring forth the warriors. Heijun barely had time to catch his breath before 5 Rexian warriors entered the arena. They were massive, covered in battle scars, and each carried different weapons. The crowd began to click their mandibles together, creating a sound like applause. Survive for 10 minutes and you pass, the announcer said. 10 minutes against 5 trained warriors. Heijun had basic combat training, but he was no soldier. The first warrior charged at him with a blade as long as Heijun's arm. Heijun rolled aside at the last second. He had no weapon, no armor, nothing but his wet uniform. The warriors circled him. They moved in perfect coordination, each one covering the others. This was a group trained to fight as one unit. Heijun could not beat them with strength or skill. He needed something else. He needed to be unpredictable. Heijun suddenly ran straight at one warrior, then dropped and slid between its legs. The warriors turned to follow him, but their perfect formation broke. Heijun grabbed a fallen piece of broken blade from the arena floor. It was barely longer than his hand, but it was something. The warriors adapted quickly and reformed. But Heijun did not fight them directly. He kept moving, rolling, jumping, doing things no Vrexian warrior would do. He looked weak and clumsy, but it confused them. They expected patterns. He gave them chaos. When a warrior swung at him, Heijun fell backward, letting the blade pass over him. When two tried to trap him in a corner, he climbed onto one's back and used it to leap over the other. The crowd's clicking grew louder. They had never seen anyone fight like this. Time stretched forever. Heijun's muscles screamed. His lungs burned. He took several hits, and his uniform was torn and bloody. But he kept moving, kept being unpredictable. And finally, a horn sounded. 10 minutes. He had survived. The warriors stopped immediately and stepped back. Heijun collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. Through blurred vision, he saw Thera in the queen's box. She was making that strange smile expression again. "The second trial is complete," the announcer said. This time, there was respect in the metallic voice. "Prepare for the final trial. The riddle of worth." The arena fell silent. The queen herself rose from her seat and descended to the arena floor. She walked to Heijun, her massive form towering over him. He struggled to stand, refusing to face her on his knees. "You have done well, human," the queen said. "Better than any outsider before you. Now comes the question that has no answer. Answer wisely, and you go free. Answer poorly, and you die. What makes a life valuable?" Heijun's mind raced. This was a philosophical question. There was no single right answer. But there had to be an answer the queen wanted to hear. An answer that fit Vrexian values. He could say efficiency, or service to the greater good, or contribution to the hive. Those were answers a Vrexian would expect. But Heijun thought about Thera, imprisoned for 20 years because she felt emotions. He thought about the queen, who had locked away her own daughter. He decided to tell the truth. "A life is valuable because it can change," Heijun said. "Because it can grow and learn and become something unexpected. You asked what makes a life valuable, not what makes a life useful. Value is not about function. It is about potential. It is about the ability to surprise the universe with something new." The queen stared at him. The entire arena was silent. Seconds passed like hours. Then Thera spoke from the box above. "He speaks of hope, of the chance to become more than we are born to be. Is that not valuable, mother?" The queen's eyes shifted to her daughter, then back to Heijun. Her expression was impossible to read. "You have passed the trial of 3, she said finally. "By ancient law, you are free to go. And you must be honored as a friend to the Empire." The crowd erupted in clicking, louder than before. Heijun swayed on his feet, barely believing it. He had survived. He was free, but as he looked up at Thera, still held by guards, he realized something. He might be free, but she was not. And walking away now would mean leaving her to return to that terrible sleep. He could not do that. He would not do that. "I have one request," Heijun said to the queen. The clicking stopped. The queen tilted her head. "Speak. Free your daughter. Let her live." The queen's body went rigid. "That is not your concern. You asked what makes a life valuable. I told you. Now prove you understood the answer. Let Thera choose her own path." The arena exploded with noise. Some Vrexians clicked in anger, others in what might have been agreement. The queen stood frozen, facing a choice she had avoided for 20 years. And for the first time in her long reign, she did not know what to do. The queen stood motionless for a long moment. The arena remained silent, waiting. Every Rexian eye was fixed on their ruler, watching to see what she would do. Hejun kept his eyes on the queen, his body trembling from exhaustion, but his will unbroken. "You asked me to release a threat to our entire way of life," the queen said slowly. "You asked me to allow emotion to spread like disease through my empire." "I ask you to let your daughter live," Hejun replied. "To make her own choices. To be more than a prisoner or a secret." Before the queen could respond, Thera pulled free from the guards. They reached for her, but she spoke quickly. "I challenge your right to imprison me, mother. I challenge the law that says emotion is weakness." This human survived 3 impossible trials using the very things you call disease. He used creativity born from curiosity. He used unpredictability born from fear and hope. He used words born from compassion. And he won. Murmurs spread through the crowd. This was unheard of. A member of the royal family speaking against the queen, against tradition itself. "You are young and foolish," the queen said. But her voice lacked its usual certainty. "I am 20 years old, and I have never seen the sun," Thera shot back. "I have never touched another being who was not a guard dragging me to imprisonment. I have never had a choice about anything in my entire existence. Is that the life you want for me? Is that what a mother wants for her child?" The word mother seemed to strike the queen like a physical blow. She turned away, her massive body blocking out the light. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, meant only for those nearby. "I did what I thought was necessary. What I thought was right." "Then think again," Hejun said. "Because the galaxy is changing. Humans, Rexians, and hundreds of other species are learning to live together. The ones who survive are the ones who can adapt, who can learn, who can feel compassion for those different from themselves." A new voice suddenly echoed across the arena. "The human speaks truth." Everyone turned. An elderly Rexian had stood up in the crowd. Its body was scarred, and its color had faded with age. "I am Elder Kethis. I remember the old days, before we suppressed all emotion. We were not always this way. We chose this path, thinking it would make us strong. But look at us now. We are efficient. We are powerful. But we have forgotten what it means to truly live." Other Rexians began to stand. Not many, but enough to notice. They did not speak, but their action was clear. They supported the elder's words. The queen turned back to face the crowd. Hejun could see the conflict in her posture. She was a ruler caught between tradition and change, between duty and love. "If I allow this," the queen said, "everything will change. Our society will fracture. Or it will grow," Thera said softly. "Please, mother, give me a chance." The moment hung suspended. Then, slowly, the queen's shoulders lowered. She looked at her daughter, really looked at her, for the first time in decades. "By my authority as queen, I grant Princess Thera her freedom," she announced. The words seemed to cost her greatly. She will be given quarters in the palace and the right to move freely. "This is my decree." The arena erupted in noise. Some clicked in approval, others in anger. Hejun saw guards moving through the crowds, trying to maintain order. The society was indeed fracturing, right before his eyes. Suddenly, an alarm began to wail. Different from the palace alarms. This one came from outside. A guard rushed to the queen. "Your Majesty, a fleet of human ships has entered orbit. They are demanding the release of Captain Kim." Hejun's heart leaped. Yuna and Diane had gotten word out. The Terran Coalition had sent help. "Tell them their captain is safe and will be released immediately," the Queen said. But Thera stepped forward. No, ask them to send a representative. We need to discuss a new treaty. A real treaty, built on understanding, not just trade. The Queen looked at her daughter with surprise. You presume to make decisions for the Empire? I presume to help build a better future. Is that not what a princess should do? For the first time, Hajun saw something like pride flicker across the Queen's features. She nodded to the guard. Do as the princess suggests. Hours later, Hajun stood in a medical bay while a Vrexian doctor tended to his wounds. The doctor worked in silence, but Hajun noticed it was more gentle than necessary. Maybe news of the trial had spread. Maybe some Vrexians were already starting to think differently. Yuna and Doyun were allowed to visit. Yuna hugged him so hard his ribs hurt. Doyun just smiled and shook his head. We thought you were dead, Yuna said, her eyes wet. We contacted the coalition as soon as you disappeared. Commander Soman brought an entire battle group. I am glad you did not start a war, Hajun said. It was close, Doyun admitted. But then, the Vrexians sent a message explaining what happened. Commander Soman could not believe it. A human passing the trial of 3. You were going to be famous. Hajun did not want fame. He just wanted to go home. But he knew his work here was not finished. That night, he met with Commander Soman, a stern woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She listened to his story without interrupting. So you want us to negotiate a new treaty? She asked when he finished. I think we have a chance to change things here. Real change. The Vrexians are starting to question their own beliefs. If we help them through this transition, we could turn them from distant trade partners into true allies. Or we could watch their empire collapse into civil war, Soman countered. The traditionalists will not give up easily, which is why we need to help. Show them that emotion does not mean weakness. That different ways of thinking can coexist. Soman studied him for a long moment. You have changed, Captain. When you left Earth, you were just another tired diplomat. Now you sound like an idealist. Maybe I learned it from a princess locked in a cylinder, Hajun said. Soman smiled slightly. Very well. I will authorize negotiations. But understand, if this goes wrong, both our species could pay the price. I understand. Over the following days, Hajun worked with Thera and a group of reformist Vrexians to draft a new proposal. Not just trade agreements, but cultural exchange programs. Human teachers would come to Vrexia to share art, music, and philosophy. Vrexian scientists would visit human colonies to share their technology. It was ambitious, perhaps too ambitious, but Thera insisted. We have spent too long afraid of feeling, she told the Council of Vrexian leaders. This fear has made us stagnant. Look at the humans. They are younger than us as a species, yet they spread across the stars faster. Why? Because they embrace change. Because they dare to dream of impossible things. Not all the Vrexians agreed. Some walked out of the meetings. Some spoke of rebellion, but others listened. And slowly, carefully, change began to take root. The Queen watched all of this from her throne. She rarely spoke, but Hajun noticed she never stopped Thera. Perhaps she was waiting to see what would happen. Perhaps she was hoping her daughter would succeed where she had feared to try. On the 7th day, as Hajun prepared to finally return home, Thera came to say goodbye. They stood in the palace gardens, an area Hajun had not known existed. Flowers that glowed in the dark grew around them, beautiful and strange. Thank you, Thera said simply, for accidentally releasing you from prison and almost starting a war? Hajun asked with a smile. Thera's return smile was much better now. She had been practicing. For showing me that the universe is bigger than my mother's fears. For teaching me that being different is not being broken. You taught me something too, Hajun said. That courage is not about being unafraid. It is about being afraid and choosing to hope anyway. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Thera reached out and gently touched Heijun's hand. It was a very human gesture, one she must have learned by watching him. The real work starts now, she said. Building a new Vrexia will take years, maybe generations. There will be resistance. There will be failures. But there will also be progress, Hajin said. And that is worth fighting for. As his ship lifted off the next morning, Heijun looked down at the dark metal planet one last time. Somewhere down there, a princess was changing the future of an entire species. And it had all started because one curious human could not ignore a strange sound in a forbidden corridor. Sometimes, he thought, the smallest choices led to the biggest changes. 3 years had passed since Heijun left the Vrexian home world. He had returned to his quiet life on New Sol Colony, working as a teacher now instead of a diplomat. He thought the adventure was behind him. But the universe had other plans. The message came early one morning. It was from Thera herself, marked urgent. Heijun opened it with trembling hands. Captain Kim, I need your help. Please come. Everything we built is falling apart. Heijun did not hesitate. Within a day, he was on a ship heading back to Vrexia. As his vessel approached the planet, he noticed immediate changes. The dark metal structures were still there, but now they were decorated with colors. Patterns had been painted on the hive towers. It looked less like a machine and more like a place where people actually lived. But when he landed, the atmosphere was tense. Vrexian guards met him, but they looked nervous. They escorted him quickly to the palace, where Thera waited in a council chamber. She looked older now, more confident, but also tired. Very tired. Thank you for coming, she said, embracing him in a gesture that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. I did not know who else to call. What happened? Heijun asked. Thera gestured to a holographic display. It showed the Vrexian Empire, but now it was divided by glowing red lines. Civil unrest. The traditionalists have formed a resistance movement. They say I'm destroying our culture, making us weak. Last month, they attacked 3 reform schools where we were teaching emotional literacy. 12 students died. Heijun felt his chest tighten. And the queen? Thera's expression grew complicated. My mother is dying. Old age finally catching up to her. She has perhaps months left. The traditionalists say that when she dies, they will not accept me as the new queen. They will split the empire and take half our worlds with them. What do you need from me? The truth. We need someone that people trust to tell them the truth about what change has brought us. You are known here. The human who passed the trial of 3. Many Vrexians respect you, even among the traditionalists. Before Heijun could respond, an alarm sounded. A guard rushed in. Princess, the queen is calling for you. And for the human. They hurried to the queen's chambers. Heijun had never been in this part of the palace. It was quieter here, darker. The queen lay on a raised platform, her once golden armor now dull. Her massive body seemed smaller, fragile, but her eyes were still sharp. Captain Kim, she said, her voice weak but clear. You have returned, Your Majesty. Heijun bowed. Do not bow to a dying relic, the queen said. I called you here because I need to tell you something. I need to tell both of you something before I go. Thera moved to her mother's side. It was the closest Heijun had seen them since that day in the arena. I was wrong, the queen said simply. I have spent 3 years watching my daughter transform our empire. I have seen our people learn to smile, to create art, to form bonds beyond duty. I have seen them become more than I ever allowed them to be. And I have realized that my greatest mistake was not imprisoning Thera. It was imprisoning myself in fear. Tears ran down Thera's face. Agent had not known Rexians could cry, but apparently they could. "I do not ask for forgiveness," the Queen continued. "I ask only that you finish what you started. Show our people that change is not death. It is rebirth. Mother, rest. Save your strength," Thera said. "No, there is one more thing I must do." The Queen's eyes fixed on Heijun. "Captain Kim, I name you Friend of the Hive, the first non-Rexian to ever hold this title. You have earned it not through conquest, but through compassion. And I ask you to stay. Help my daughters save our people from themselves." Heijun looked at Thera, who nodded desperately. He thought about his quiet life on New Seoul, his small apartment, his simple teaching job. Then he thought about 12 students who had died for daring to learn about emotions. He thought about an empire tearing itself apart because fear was fighting against hope. "I will stay," he said. The Queen's body relaxed. "Good. Then my last act as ruler will be to formally name Thera as my heir and to declare the old laws void. Emotion is no longer illegal. Expression is no longer weakness. We are a new people now. Let those who cannot accept this leave. Those who remain will build something greater." She closed her eyes then, and for a moment, Heijun thought she had died. But she was just resting. Thera took her mother's massive claw in her smaller hands and held it gently. The next weeks were chaos. The Queen's declaration split the empire exactly as everyone had feared. A third of the Rexian worlds declared independence, led by the traditionalists. They vowed to maintain the old ways. But 2/3 remained with Thera, willing to try this new path. Hajun worked alongside Yuna and Oyan, who had returned to help. They organized meetings, mediated disputes, and most importantly, they listened. They listened to Rexians who were afraid of losing their identity. They listened to those who were excited about new possibilities. They listened to the confused, the angry, the hopeful, and the lost. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The Rexians were not rejecting change because they hated emotion. They were resisting because they did not know how to process it. For generations, they had been taught that feelings were dangerous. Now, they were being told to embrace them. It was like asking someone who had been blind their whole life to suddenly see. The light was overwhelming. So Heijun and Thera created something new. Schools, yes, but also support groups. Places where Rexians could learn about emotions in a safe environment. They brought in human counselors who taught meditation, art therapy, and conflict resolution. They created spaces where Rexians could explore their feelings without judgment. The Queen died 2 months after Hajun's return. Her funeral was attended by both reformists and traditionalists. Even those who had split from the empire came to pay respects. Thera gave the eulogy, speaking honestly about her mother's mistakes and her final wisdom. "She was not perfect," Thera said to the massive crowd. "She hurt me in ways I am still learning to heal. But in the end, she chose growth over pride. She chose her people's future over her own legacy. That is the lesson she leaves us. It is never too late to change. It is never too late to choose a better path." After the funeral, Thera was crowned as the new queen, but she insisted on changing the title. She would not be called queen. Instead, she chose First Guide, a title that emphasized leadership through wisdom rather than absolute authority. The traditionalist worlds watched these developments with suspicion. But as years passed, something interesting happened. Young Rexians from the traditionalist worlds began to secretly visit the reform worlds. They saw the art, the music, the communities built on genuine connection rather than just duty. And slowly, some of them chose to stay. The traditionalist leaders tried to stop this flow, but they could not. Because the one thing they had forgotten was that curiosity, once awakened, could not be easily suppressed. 5 years after that first mission, Heijun stood in the palace gardens with Thera. The gardens had expanded dramatically. Now they covered an entire district of the capital city. Rexian children played among the glowing flowers, their laughter filling the air. Real laughter, not the clicking of mandibles. "Look at them," Thera said softly. "A whole generation growing up, knowing that it is okay to feel. That it is okay to be different. You did this," Heijun said. "We did this. You, me, Yuna, Doyoon, Commander Soman, Elder Kethis, and thousands of others who believed change was possible. But most of all, my mother did this. By finally admitting she was wrong and giving us permission to be right." They walked through the gardens to a new monument that had been erected at the center. It showed a human and a Vrexian reaching toward each other, their hands almost touching. The inscription beneath was simple. "He came to deliver papers. He delivered hope." Below that, in smaller text, it read, "In memory of all who dared to change. In honor of all who dare to feel. May we never forget that our differences make us stronger, and our compassion makes us whole." Henjum smiled. It had been a long journey from that day. He heard a strange sound in a forbidden corridor. He had just wanted to complete a simple mission and go home. Instead, he had helped reshape an entire civilization. "Do you ever regret it?" Thera asked. "Giving up your quiet life?" Heijun thought about his apartment on New Seoul, sitting empty now. He thought about the teaching job he had abandoned. But then he looked at the playing children, at the Vrexians walking freely through the gardens, at Thera herself. Strong and confident and free. "Not for a second," he said. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimed. It was time for the daily gathering, where Vrexians and humans came together to share stories, songs, and meals. A tradition that had started small, but now involved thousands. As they walked toward the sound, Heijun realized something. He had not saved Thera that day in the dark chamber. They had saved each other. And in doing so, they had saved an entire empire from slowly dying of loneliness. The universe was vast and full of countless species. But the one thing that connected them all, that made them all truly alive, was the capacity to care, to hope, to love, and to change. That was the real mission. That had always been the mission, and it would never be complete. But that was okay. Because the journey, as Heijun had learned, was what mattered most. The sun was setting on the Vrexian home world, painting the metal towers in shades of orange and gold.